This is the Collecting Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Pearse, here with your co-host, Bill Hamel.
I'm so much more comfortable collecting real estate than I am collecting other stuff.
All right, collecting real estate. We're talking about your fifth property today.
Sounds great. That was 2 Kent Street in Albany in the Pine Hills neighborhood.
I was going to ask you what the address was, but you beat me to it. What was the date?
That was February of 97. So I should prepare better for these. I'm just going right off the cuff as far as these dates. But that one I remember because I purchased my parents' house that same month of 97, where we were able to relocate from our rental properties in Albany and move back to Clifton Park into a nice single family house. At the same time, we got into 2 Kent Street, which was a foreclosure property needing a lot of work. And I failed to mention this one to you also. This is once we got much better momentum, we, at the same time in that same month, we bought another auction property, a 2-family in Ballston Spa. So we were now doing 2 rehab projects at once. So challenging myself and Greg, where one rehab is in Albany, another rehab is in Ballston Spa. So I was doing this 35, 40-minute back and forth at certain times between these 2 projects.
All right, I have a couple questions. First, did you forget to tell me a story on the 4th property?
Forgot about that. Yeah, that, a little comic relief on that one. So at one point, just in general operations of this single family, we ended up having plumbing issues, which, we're always looking to tackle those the most straightforward way, where you're just snaking the main drain, solving the plumbing issues for the tenant. And this went on for a little bit of time, where we're temporarily fixing the sewer. So once you go back 2, 3, 4 times, you realize that it's something more. And after continued troubleshooting, realizing that the sewer leaving the house in the back, failed. So in Menands, they had used clay sewer pipe originally. And after 70 or 80 years, clay sewer pipe breaks down and fails, or it can break down and fail. In this case, it did. And we had to dig up the backyard and replace the sewer line from the house to the main village connection. So this was a project for the day, myself jumping in with a contractor. We had dug our ditch, let our tenant know not to use the sewer because we're making the repair. So obviously anything that went down any drains in the house, had nowhere to go. So the, 17, 18-year-old kid who was tenant of ours, one of the 3 of the family, he, I don't know what he was thinking, but he didn't take us seriously, realizing that he might be able to, sneak in using the drains. So we're in the pit getting started, laying some pipe. And, now we have, the tenant using the bathroom in the morning. And me and the contractor were lucky enough to, experience, this guy's morning routine at our work boots.
Oh no.
So at the time, you have this, I guess probably a few emotions, that go across. First it's just like, what the F, and this, you're a little upset. What, I can't believe he's doing that. And then it, once you get past that, it you can't find it a little bit humorous, on how something like that could occur. And we were the lucky ones to be, at the bottom of the pit.
Sometimes you got to go. You told me that story after we recorded, and we had to circle back and bring that back
Yeah,
up.
it's just one of those funny details, along the way when you're doing this type of work.
Mm-hmm. So this fifth property in Albany, what was that one in Boston Spa purchased before this or right after?
They were like within a week or two of each other. So the one in Albany at 2 Kent Street was a broker that I had become familiar with, and she was she was giving me the heads up on deals. So that one came off the multiple listing service as a bank REO property, otherwise foreclosure property. And we got under contract there, and I think we were along the way. And then the Boston Spot auction notice was put up, and we had bid on that. And you only have 30 days to buy it from when you're the successful bidder. So I think that we closed on both of them very close to each other, because the projects were certainly running parallel, where I remember spending a lot of time, unfortunately, traveling from one to the other, trying to do both projects at the same time.
And you had purchased your parents' house in between.
Correct. Fortunately, that one was, my parents moved out. We moved right in. Now that I'm remembering, it wasn't just a matter, we did just move right in, but that was, probably a project in itself. From remembering back now, my mother got good at wallpapering. So over the years, growing up, she had wallpapered probably 3 or 4 times in various rooms. So, that was the, kind of the other project that went on for probably months and months, up to a year, where I was scraping wallpaper.
She got good at putting up wallpaper. You got good at taking it down.
Yeah, exactly. And when you're good at hanging wallpaper, that's not fun for the guy taking it down, because if you're good at it, you are making it adhere to the walls very well, which mm-hmm. makes the scraping a little more challenging.
Mm-hmm. So it's been interesting to start at the beginning of your real estate journey and get to this point. It seemed like you and your friend had a plan, but you're moving kind of slowly because you're young. You get a house, you get a second house, but now all of a sudden you have 7 houses. It seems like out of nowhere, you're really collecting real estate. Did you have an identity shift at that point? Did it feel different having 7 properties under your belt instead of just the new guy who's learning how to do some basic construction?
I think it felt different. What the feeling was, finally getting traction. Where in the early days, it was slow year by year. And, I think, up until right to the 4th property, we had been in it for probably close to 3 years. So it was certainly slowly but surely. And then, you buy a new single family house to live in, and then you buy these 2 rehab projects at the same time. At that point, I remember feeling that, okay, here it is. We now have just gotten some serious traction, and we're busy. Mm-hmm. And in my mind, in the early days, which is definitely not the most important thing, but for me, being really busy made things seem so significant for me, because busy equaled successful. Mm-hmm. But that's not what it's, you can be super successful and not, be so busy with busy things. But at that time of my life, having all of these projects at the same time, made it seem like we now had some traction, and we arrived in this business.
I think that's so important, that people mistake busyness with successfulness and productivity. isn't necessarily always doing something. That doesn't mean you're doing the best thing for your business. Um, Looking back on it with 20 plus years more experience, how would you handle it differently? Having these two rehabs going on at the same time, you have this new house that you're moving into, and then you have four other rentals that you're trying to manage.
Instead of operating on, just super thin budgets. So each rehab project, you bought it for a certain amount and you budgeted a certain amount to do the rehabs. So it would have been much wiser where you're able to do to arrange more capital expenditures in the budget where you added to your financing, or you just plan to raise a little bit more money for the projects and hire some help, even if it was just general labor for these particular projects, because a lot of it was, in the beginning of these rehab projects, it involves, a lot of demolition work and getting things stripped down to the point you can now build, based on, the vision of what the rehab is going to be. So, I'm working during the day on both projects doing labor, right up to finishing the project, where we didn't have a lot of help. The only help that we did have on either project were just specialty type contracting things that we just couldn't do. I know we had to get help from a plumber to do some rough-in plumbing work on the Boston Spa property. And we had to do some roofing work and probably a few other things. But the majority of this work was, myself and my partner, Greg, who, it was just 7 days a week, 8, 10, 12 hours a day, just living it.
So if you weren't doing that rehab yourself, what would you have spent your time doing?
If I wasn't doing that rehab myself, you're planning the project better, instead of just going day to day and, just building as you went, figuring things out as we went, is to actually plan the project much more detailed with a much better strategy, getting other people involved. So it would have gone quicker, because when you're buying these projects, you have, vacant apartments. So there's some value to getting some help, having the projects go quicker so you can rent the apartments faster. So, even though we're doing all this work ourselves and saving money from not having to hire people, every month that you didn't have these apartments finished or rented, it's just lost rent.
See, I was expecting you to go more down the route of looking for another property, maybe building a team to grow the business, but even within the house, within the project, you would have changed things. It's
Yeah,
just such a
that certainly crossed my mind when you asked the question. But at that point in our careers, buying that single family to move into and 2 rehab projects at once, to even consider looking for more property at that particular time. Like if I was to look back now, oh yes, absolutely, I agree with you. It's finding that next deal. But back then, it was so much all at one period of time. I wish that we would have planned and gotten some more help to make the projects go quicker, and being part of that planning process. But, at that point, finding something else at that time would have really been difficult for us, based on, still having W-2 jobs, 2 rehab projects, just moved from Albany to Clifton Park. I wouldn't even have considered it at that point.
mm-hmm.
Looking back now, sure, you'll always be looking for the next deal is huge.
It's a great discussion point on working on the business or working in the business. There's multiple books on it, like the E Myth, and we could spend all day talking about it. But to move on, was the Boston Spa property the one on Milton? I'm just checking my
Yeah,
notes. Okay, so I guess
396 Milton Avenue.
we can treat those two as a package deal for this episode. How did you fund the two of them being so close together and still being the young guy that you were?
They were construction rehab projects. So my friend from Homestead Funding, Paula, who was our mortgage originator at the time, she helped us out a lot with FHA 203K type funding. In this case, I think we're a little bit past the FHA, but there were construction rehab programs that were very similar to the FHA 203K, where they funded us that purchase price, and we figured out finished values and construction budgets, and the loans were structured accordingly. So when you get to a certain part of each project, the bank would give you installment money to keep the project going. And then when the project is finished, they inspect, make sure that everything is all set. And once the construction is done, you go into a more traditional loan, which is going to have lower interest rate, better terms, more of a permanent financing.
How did you prioritize one house over the other with two going on at the same time? Did you and Greg each take one for yourselves, or you just go every other day? How did that work?
It's chaos. That's how I operated. I depending on what was going on, at each property, it's impossible to remember exactly, but I just remember running them both at the same time. Both had equal importance. Both had similar type rehabs. So I was, instead of focusing on one and leaving the other one, waiting, I was going back and forth, which probably was horribly inefficient. But yeah, we were, during the day, I was running back and forth on both projects. Greg was working a day job, and he would go to either project at nighttime, to handle whatever tasks he was handling.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think of the overall scope of what you're working on from a maps perspective, because I have a familiarity with the area. So you moved from Albany to Clifton Park, but you still have Albany properties. You have the one house in Menands. Now you have this Boston Spa property. Did you start to feel stretched out? Because originally you were all in Albany. You were living there. Your homes were there. Your investments. Now you're kind of stretched around this capital district. How did you manage that?
I managed it. It's literally, back in those days of my life in the mid 20s, I was just a hard worker. I was just bulling forward, getting up early and going out and just pounding all day, just getting it done, just putting in a lot of hours. And at this point, I would say developing more skills in the rehab world. And fortunately for me, that type of physical work I'm quick at, so, I was always able to move pretty quick with certain projects and keep projects moving along. So that's what excited me, not only about these projects, but this type of work moving forward was, just seeing that daily, weekly progress was so exciting to me. Getting closer and closer to completion was just amazing, knowing that, okay, soon enough, we're going to be renting these apartments, portfolioing these buildings. And then, yeah, that it was off to the next buys. But while these were going on, I was just completely consumed by these two projects, probably for, 3 months, 4 months. And we just lived it.
Mm-hmm. I'm about to start my first construction, so I don't have any experience myself, but I can imagine how you would gamify the experience of rehabbing a place and how you get that satisfaction of, okay, I painted this room. It feels like that level's over. And you almost have these two games going on at the same time, and you want to finish the game. You want to win the game and get everything done to the best of your ability.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I look forward to you taking on your project, because I'll give you some pointers on the right way to do it, not the way I did it back in my mid-20s.
And one at a time for me.
Yeah, that's much more efficient in all reality. Just like I said, and the time should have been spent strategizing, not just, jumping out of bed and speeding to work to just jump back in. There's so much value in a great plan and a strategy, and regrouping on your strategy on a weekly basis to try to keep as efficient as possible, instead of probably wasting a lot of time just feeling good about working hard.
Absolutely. There's so many systems out there that you can find on the internet that really help with that stuff. How long did it take for you to complete those rehabs and get renters in there and get these properties cash flowing?
I'm guessing about 3 months. I can't remember exactly, but I would say we bought these in February of '97, so it's probably fair to say that they took us, right through the spring, early summer, and probably renting these out in June, July of that year.
Do you have any problems getting them rented?
We had pretty good luck on Kent Street. The Albany market's usually pretty quick. So I think they filled up. I think we had a little bit more of a challenge in Ballston Spa. The village of Ballston Spa is probably, I would say, 3-4 miles from Interstate 87, which I learned along the way was kind of a measurement of, how easy it is to rent apartments. So the closer your buildings are, to that interstate, was a direct reflection on how much your phone rang when you advertised an apartment. So, the Ballston Spa property was a bit off the beaten track, even though it was like right in the old historic village of Ballston Spa. It didn't get nearly the amount of phone calls the Albany property did.
That's a good piece of information right there to measure your properties, how close they are to an interstate. I think stuff like that can get away from investors and start looking at the kitchens, the bathrooms. You forget about how proximity to an interstate. Once you had renters in there, were there any crazy stories, anything that really stuck with you?
Yes, absolutely. Of course.
That's a quick yes.
In the early days, we had some excitement that way. I made mistakes similar to the construction stories of just being so anxious to get apartments rented, not paying attention to the fundamentals of screening and making sure that you're getting the right people in your apartments, which really shaped my future, because it went from being anxious and having difficult experiences with tenants to realizing that, okay, you have no choice but to be super patient with the screening process and the tenant selection process, after those projects, because that's the name of the game of success in this business is, getting good tenants in your buildings. So the Ballston Spa property, there, we did rent to, a village family that they were a village of Ballston Spa family, and they were able to convince us, that they were going to be great tenants, and they were not good. They were not good. They were took 2 or 3 months of not being able to pay rent, and then we had to remove that first tenant on the first floor, probably 5-6 months after they moved in. So that was one of our hopefully, I'm trying to think ahead. I know I learned the hard way a few more times after that, but This was a pretty painful experience on who not to rent to.
What did you change about your tenant screening process after that? How did you screen the tenants better in the future?
You just have to go right by the book. In the future, it was as simple as running credit, getting multiple landlord references, and solid employment background. And you can't make justification to issues that you find in your screening. As anxious as you are to rent it, you have to see what's on that credit report, because that really does tell the tale of how they're going to pay their bills. That's why credit reports are so valuable to, whether it be, banks for any type of borrowers or landlords renting to people. And then that landlord reference is just as important. It may be even more important. So in the early days, you think you're getting good landlord references, and some people are savvy enough to give you bogus landlords, and dealing with that on a few occasions. So you tighten up your script when you're getting landlord referrals, basically, questioning, the so-called landlord reference with specific questions, that will highlight whether this is a legitimate landlord reference or not. So I would use landlord jargon, talking about the properties that they may own a little bit, giving them an opportunity to elaborate, on their landlording. So, now you can really see that you're talking to a landlord, where if that reference doesn't react or respond, to some of your landlord jargon questioning, you find out very quickly that you're not talking to a legitimate landlord reference. And then that's immediate disqualification on that application.
It makes so much sense. You think, but it makes sense when you say it, but it's not easy to do that right away because you're so anxious to get this rented. Just another great piece of advice right there. I want to ask if you had an exit strategy when you bought these, but I think I know what the answer is going to be.
Buy and hold, collecting real estate, as we say.
Mm-hmm. And how long did you hold on to these?
Actually, the 396 Milton Avenue in Ballston Spa, we sold that. We probably sold that in the early 2000s, probably 2003, 2004. We had some investors in Ballston Spa that expressed interest, that we met up there somehow, some way. And, it ended up turning into an off-market deal for them because, one conversation led to the next, and they showed some interest in the property. And this was so far out of our way. We had at the time, collected a lot of real estate in the city of Albany, and, maybe in a little bit in Manan. So we had that portfolio going. And then we had this 2-family 35 minutes away in Ballston Spa, which was inconvenient for us to operate, just because it wasn't in our core area. So when we had the opportunity to sell it, we, took advantage of it.
How did they contact you, these investors?
I was contacted. It was the gentleman who we sold it to. We actually sold it to him and his wife. And I believe his wife was in the real estate business. I think she was in the lending business, and through certain means, we ended up meeting, just through some type of a network, and we had stayed in touch, shared each other's business that we were working on. So once you realize that we had this property in Ballston Spa, that's where she was located, and one discussion led to another, and they expressed interest. And quickly met her husband, who was more of the operations guy on the few rental properties that they owned. And we made a deal.
I think that's really important that even when you have this buy and hold mentality and you love to collect real estate, that when it makes sense to get rid of it, just get rid of it. It's costing you money to operate this place, and you have a great offer on the table, so take it.
Yeah, and I think looking back, we were having much better luck in Albany. Albany, has been a great rental market over the years. That's where the demand had been or is. You advertise in an apartment in a good location in Albany, and the phone rings, and you're able to rent it in short order. And the Ballston Spa, it never had those characteristics, where it was just more difficult to manage that property efficiently. So when we had the opportunity to sell it, we had no problem making that move.
But I've heard you preach the advantages of investing in townships. Do you think it's Ballston Spa in particular, or was it this one building that was hard to rent?
Well, that certainly is a township. It's just a small village. And, fortunately, it does have those characteristics where, you're able to run your building, without too much bother from the municipality. So it did fit that. But just being so far off the beaten path, made it a little bit more challenging just to get tenants on a short order and the quality of tenants that we were looking for, that we were able to find in Albany.
So you don't have the same rules and regulations from the city, but it might be harder to rent it.
Yeah, it just depends on the location. We're as we sit now, specifically looking for townships outside the inner cities. There's so much value in that, but if it just can't be any town. So if you're finding a town that's off the beaten track, and it's not going to have a population or a job base, it might be easy to run your rental property, but you don't have the infrastructure of people to make it easy. So if you don't have a lot of jobs and there's not a lot of population in that town, there's not a lot of people to rent your apartments, which could cause a problem.
Absolutely. Is there anything else that really stuck with you from these that you want to mention?
Yeah, another funny story that you've never heard, well, maybe you have. That long commute from 2 Kent Street to 396 Milton Avenue, one particular day where I had a 40-foot ladder strapped to my Mazda 2002 like mini pickup truck, which I took this stuff for granted so much by making the trip with ladders tied to my roof. And one day this ladder was just way too big for this truck. And as I was leaving Albany, getting off the off ramp to 87, heading north, probably 30 miles to Ballston Spa, my rope let loose on that ladder in the truck. So here I am, always like in this frenzy to get from one spot to the next. And here's my ladder is flying off the back of my pickup truck, like literally in a helicopter, landing in the highway. So I'm left, okay, chaos. So I'm getting off the side of the road, running out into I-87 where there's traffic coming. I'm dragging a ladder to the side of the road, feeling like I'm gonna die. And that was certainly an adrenaline type experience.
If anyone doesn't know, that's a busy road right there, I-87, the Northway.
Yeah, that was very dangerous. I kind of remember that that split second vision of what was in front of me as I dragged that ladder to the side of the road. It was people coming quickly in cars. I could imagine what they were thinking of me at the time when they passed by.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And no one was harmed. Everyone made it out.
No one was harmed. No one was harmed. I didn't see anybody on the news. I know I got off that next exit and, kind of pulled to the side. and had to regroup for a little bit because it was that crazy.
Now we'll start with a fun story, end with a fun story. So I
Yeah,
guess we're
I'm sure I have plenty more over these properties.
on to property, I guess number 8 next. Big jump there. All right. Well, looking forward to hear more about it.
Fantastic. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Bill.